Welcome to The Bold Book of the Day with Dr. Denise Nicholson, a show that is a central hub and safe space for authors to share their stories. The Bold Book with Dr. Denise begins now.
Hello, welcome to The Bold Book of the Day. My name is Dr. Denise Nicholson, and this podcast is for anyone looking for inspiration. Today, I have the beautiful and talented and thesaurus, if you may.
Oh, now you're going to be like my kids and make fun of me.
I love it. No, they may be making fun, but I love it. Welcome, Carla Stockton. Carla, welcome.
Thank you so much, Denise. This is wonderful to be here.
Let's start at the beginning. What inspired you to take your life experience and just shape them into this unique collection of essays and vignettes?
You know what? I started out, I was back in school and I was an old person back in school. And I thought I was going to be writing about my mother's experience as a refugee and how that affected me. And most of it was about everybody else in my life. And that's what I wrote my thesis about for my MFA program. And my readers at the time when I turned in the thesis said, you know, when you're writing about yourself, it's so much more interesting than when you're writing about everybody else. And I kind of blanched like, no, I'm not interesting. They are. But as I read through it, I realized that what makes it interesting is not me or them, but the amalgam of us, the combination that we have become. I am a descendant of I'm a first generation American on one side. My mother and her family came here as refugees in the 1930s with nothing. My father's family are old Dutch Knickerbocker residents of New York State since the 1600s. So, and two of my great grandfathers fought for the Union in the Civil War, and two of my great grandfather's brothers also fought for the Union Army in the Civil War. My great grandfather, because they were here and because that mattered to them, was actually an unofficial stop on the Underground Railroad. He was involved in that whole trafficking. So there was. I have this deep history on one side with American history, and on the other side, I have this brand new. You know, we came here because we wanted the American dream and we wanted to survive. So when I thought about it that way, I thought, okay, well, maybe I start with my story because my voice is not unique, but I mean, my voice is unique. I'm sorry. Let me start that over again. My voice is unique, but my experience is not. Right? My experience is a universal experience, especially for women in my generation. We faced a specific amount of anti-feminism. I mean, if you think about it, when I was coming of age, I couldn't have a checkbook. I couldn't have a check account in my name. I couldn't get a credit card. I could not take out a mortgage for a house in my name. There were so many things that we weren't allowed to do that I have seen us evolve to over the course of my life. So that's a universal experience for all of the people who were born in the 40s, 50s, and early 60s. So my story is not unique. And I think that, as you said earlier, we need models, we need inspiration. So if I take away the humility, which, you know, I was brought up in my father's Calvinist tradition, I'm not supposed to think I'm good about anything, right? But if I step away from that and say, my experience is useful to somebody out there. And what I'm finding reading the reviews of my book is that my experience really resonates for a lot of people, and it resonates in a very positive way. So that's sort of the road to it. Does that answer the question?
Of course, it definitely does. Your book also begins with your mother's escape from Europe before World War II.
Right.
How has her story shaped your voice?
You know, let me give you an anecdote that will illustrate a little bit. In 2009, I was asked to write a memoir with a man who had survived the Munich massacre. He was on the Israeli Olympic fencing team, and the hostages that were taken were all his best friends. And they shared that there was a hole in his bed, as a matter of fact. I mean, he barely escaped. And he wanted to write a book about it. But that happened in 1972. The event in Munich happened in 1972. He reached out to me in 2004, 5. And I said to him, Danny, why did you wait so long to tell this story?
Ooh.
And he said, I lived. It wasn't so interesting. And it made me cry. And I'll tell you why. When I was 11, I'm going to cry again. When I was 11, I read Leon Uris's Exodus. And all of the whispers I had been hearing in the background, all the German shrieks and shouts of finding out who died in which concentration camp and who was deported where. And I didn't know any of that. Nobody shared any of that with me as a child. I just heard the background. And when I was 11, my mother got Leon Uris's Exodus as a Book of the Month Club book, and I stole it. And I read it in one night. And suddenly it all made sense. And I went, oh my God, that's our family. That's why we're here. That's what happened. And when I went to my mother and I said, why didn't you tell me? She said, I lived. It wasn't that interesting. So,
common theme, like we think that our stories aren't interesting enough.
Exactly. Or that you carry guilt for what you didn't do, or you carry guilt
or for living.
Yes, for living. And that's, I say that in the book, that there was a moment when I realized it wasn't that I had low self-esteem. People accused me of having low self-esteem. Until I was well into my adulthood, I really felt I did not have a right to live. And it was deeply, deeply embedded. I wasn't even aware of it until I mostly started writing more about myself and my family. When I started blogging is when I started to really sort of capture that and begin to truly understand my mother for the first time. That's hard to understand the kind of pain. People think you survived, you walked away, so it's no big deal, right?
Yeah.
But you gave up
and you're
everything.
going through a lot of pain. Yeah, just
right.
survival guilt,
Yes.
a number of different experiences that is unique to the person who is surviving.
Exactly.
So you describe yourself as an amalgam. And I did not hear of the word until I read your summary. Can you please explain to me and first generation American what you're the first generation daughter of the Holocaust refugees, and so give me a little bit of explanation as what is this?
But here I was, right? Here's the amalgam. An amalgam is just a sort of a random assortment put together and made into something new, right? It's an amalgamation.
Refurbished.
Yes, I'm completely refurbished, redone,
okay.
rebuilt. With all of the parts of these various and sundry influences that are my ancestors. And when you stop to think, my father was brought up as a Dutch Reformed Calvinist, right? So I grew up in this house where he broke the rules. He did laugh, and he did allow us to dance in our house, but he was brought up feeling guilty if he did that. He also was brought up by a family who didn't want him. They were white aristocrats who believed that a white aristocrat should marry a white aristocrat. So when he began dating the very young Irish girl from the other side of the tracks, they were exactly, and they were very upset.
Yeah.
So he made up a story. He said, we're pregnant. And then he had to marry her. And then they did get pregnant, but then she died. in
Oh, wow.
childbirth with their second
Oh,
child.
wow. Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
he had
So
he
you grew up
had
without your mom?
she grew up. My sister grew up without her
She grew up.
mom.
Okay, okay.
I had a sister who was 16 years older than I,
Oh,
and
wow.
she grew up without a mom until she was 12 when my dad met my mom, which again was out of the box, out of the
Mm.
box for him, right? Thinking out of the box, because what aristocrat wasp marries a Jew from, Europe? So
Yeah.
everything was all this making and reshaping and remaking things, and I got his pain. I mean, he kept that in. I found out about that. I knew about my sister, of course, and I knew about
Mm.
his first wife. I did not know that they had a second child. I did not know that she died in childbirth with their son. I did not know that the son lived for almost a week until my father was giving a sermon. He was a lay preacher, and he was giving a sermon when I was 13. And that's how I found out about that. So here I am growing up with all this pain. Can you imagine? These people are carrying
Mm.
this pain that they're not
Heavy
sharing,
load.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes, yes.
it can't not embed in our DNA. It
And
can't.
it was Maya Angelou who said, "There's no greater pain than bearing an untold story."
That's in exactly. Yes, I
Oh
remember
my
her. Yes.
goodness. Yes.
And
Can you imagine?
there were so many buried stories in my family.
Mm-hmm. This is incredible because we're talking about stories and the power of stories, but it's also those untold stories are the thing that fuels us, because your
Yes.
father, even though he was keeping those secrets and keeping those stories hidden inside, I bet you that or those stories were just pushing him to be better, to do different, to raise his children with more love, more compassion, and differently, and not culturally stifled.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
Mm,
So that all the things that one would expect from a man with his background were completely and utterly negated. He
yeah,
never had a problem. He had a gay son, didn't bother him.
yes,
His one of his daughters married a black man. Didn't, that was perfectly wonderful to him.
yes,
Anybody we brought home, he loved, and he
yes.
loved us in the same way, exactly because he was making up for all of that.
How do the themes of culture and survival and identity echo through your book, having all
Mm.
those stories as a part of who you are?
Well, that was part of that came from the actual editing of the book. I had written this sort of sprawling look at my life since I
Mhm.
was a teenager, and I mean, I don't dwell on my childhood, and I don't dwell on my teen years, but I really wanted to focus on becoming a woman,
Mhm.
and I started out with this sort of sprawling story, lots of stories, but I also, because I was a creative nonfiction um, specialist in the School of the Arts. Um, I was writing essays all the time for school, right, about various things. I wrote about the women's movement from a personal perspective. A friend of mine who went through the experience, or a battered woman syndrome. I had a
Mhm.
friend. I had actually a mentor who was a battered woman. So what I tried to do was, and I was addicted to reading. There was a column called Hers in the New York Times in the 1970s that had writers like Lady Pogrebin, and there were just so many. I don't want to start mentioning names, but it was a column, just a very short column every week in the New York Times, written by women about women's issues, and I wrote in response to those. I dug out all the clippings that I had kept from that column and started writing essays responding to those things from where I stand now, where I stood as I was writing the book. So
Yeah.
I interspersed essays that reflect on the experience that I had with each of these issues. that sort of informed the shape of the book.
You also lived through some women's great women's movement, like women's liberation movement, the rise of the second wave of feminism,
Yep.
and also the Me Too era. If it's probably still a part of, we're probably still living in a part of the Me Too era. How has your view of womanhood evolved through each of these?
It's funny because sometimes I feel like an old codger. And I'll tell you why. There are things about the new wave of feminism that I'm not crazy about. I'm
Yes.
not sure that the pressure, and this is totally my own opinion.
Your opinion, yes.
I'm not preaching.
Yeah.
There are things from my perspective that bother me. Like, I'm not sure that we aren't putting undue pressure on boys to be overly cautious and overly careful and not know how to talk to women. We aren't helping them. We are somehow damning the way it was done in the old days, but not really leading in a positive way, I don't think, as a movement. There are many things that I love about the fluidity of young people. I still teach very young kids. I teach in the Lehman College Now program, which is for accelerated high school students who come to college. It's one of my favorite places to teach.
Oh, we have to link up because you're right here.
Yes. Where are you?
I'm in Rockland.
See, and I'm in Harlem. I live in Harlem.
Girl, we have to link up. I am going to have a author's link up in August, so I will keep you posted.
That'd be great.
So I'm trying to find a park nearby, but maybe I'll do a park in the city so more people can get to it.
That would be good. There are some really great parks right in my neighborhood.
And a lot of great authors in New York. We should certainly link up.
I live around the corner from Langston Hughes's house. I mean, this is, I mean, these are things.
Girl, can we do it there?
They do rent it out for things, and I'm not sure who is responsible for it, but we might be able to get use of that house. I can do some research if you want.
Girl, look at us collaborating.
Langston Hughes. I'm writing it down. I'm going to contact the people that I know who sponsored. I took a class there, so I know that it's used for there's a program called teaching artists, and they use it as a venue for they use it as a venue when they have professional development days. So I'll see if I can get in touch with somebody there and find out how to get it.
You are thank you so much for that, and you've made some powerful claim that we can redefine how women are seen, how we're perceived without the vitriol or the division of the modern movements. What does that look like in real life as we talk about us getting together as authors?
That's a really good question, and it's one that I think about all the time. 10 years ago, when I was in the MFA program, and everybody in the MFA program except for Joni, who was not in my program, so I didn't even get to interface with her. All the people that I was interfacing with were under 30, or at very most 35, right?
Yeah.
And I was listening to these young women talking about feminism in a way that didn't make sense to me, like the freedom to expose your body, and not expect that anybody that there will be any consequences. I have the right to expose whatever part of my body I want. I can go naked in the street, and nobody has the right to respond to it sexually. Well, okay, but how do you teach that? And where does it come from in a society that is so sexualized? And don't tell me that isn't sexualizing it. Do you know what I mean? When so much of what I'm hearing from you is highly sexualized, especially with this very fluid, non-binary, we can be anything we want. And some of that is really good, but I think some of it loses the respect that we have for one another, the respect that we have for privacy, that there's an overall sense that I have And again, I'm not preaching. This is completely my own.
Respectfully, and this is your platform, this is your time. So yeah,
But
yeah,
there's a
we
way
need
in
your
which.
perspective.
Thank you. There's a way in which it feels to me that social interaction has lost a sense of you are as important as I am. I bring
Hmm.
something to the table, you bring something to the table. I may not like what you brought to the table, but that doesn't
Yes.
mean I don't have to be, that doesn't mean I get to say, you rotten person, because you brought that to the table. It
Right.
seems to me that's missing, right?
Yes.
We've lost the art of discourse.
So
Where is it?
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, so how do we empower this next generation of women without rejecting them and devaluing them?
I think that part of that is in this idea of discourse, is
Okay.
that we need to have more talk. We need to be able
Mhm.
to communicate, not name call, not it's not about chat responses and comments on social media. It's about
Yeah.
really having meaningful discussions about what do you need from us and what do we need from you. I I am expected to respect young people, but I will tell you that I do not feel respected in a lot of places
Mhm.
as an older woman. Um,
And you are interacting with them on a regular basis.
and to be fair, my students, to almost to a person, my students may come in with an attitude, but they never leave with an attitude. We always work through
Oh,
it.
that
Um,
should be a slogan of yours.
I I usually I cannot think of a student that I have said goodbye to that we had not worked through whatever it was that was there. Um,
Yeah.
and there are so many ways in which we disagree with one another today, and we have to be able to give each other the permission to disagree with each other.
Yeah.
There's no reason why we all have to agree. And just because I expect you to honor my ethnicity does not mean that I don't honor the amalgam that is the United States of America. I
Mhm.
love the fact that we are this multicultural entity, that we
Mhm.
interact, um, we are constantly interacting in a variety of ways. We share music, we share theater, and we all interface. And I think a lot of my attitude comes from my very deep roots in theater.
Mhm. Is
And
that where your humor comes from also?
yeah.
Because there's a stream of humor throughout your memoir.
Yes, that and growing up in a Jewish family that makes fun of itself all the time.
Okay, so that's how laughter helped you, um,
Totally.
during your years of growing.
And keep in mind too that I grew up in a house where my mother married a WASP. My mother's younger sister married an Italian. They spoke Italian in their house. My mother's
Mm,
older sister married a Serb. They spoke Serbian in her house. But my mother and her two sisters, because of all the losses, and I'm not going to go into them, but because of all the
mhm,
losses they had incurred, could not separate. In the first 6-8 years of my life, I saw my aunts all the time. So I would
mhm,
go to one house and we were speaking Italian, go to another house and speak Serbian, and another house was speaking German in my grandparents' house because they thought it would keep it from me. But that it was a constant multicultural environment. And the only way to get through that is to laugh at it. I mean, I started kindergarten and the teacher said, "What's this?" And there's a scene in Portnoy's Complaint exactly like that. She held up a spatula and said, "What is this?" Because in those days you asked kids, the basic stuff in kindergarten, no more. But she said, "What is this?" And I didn't know what to tell her, even though I knew very well what it was. I thought spatula might be a Yiddish word or a Serbian word. I didn't know.
ah,
So
wow.
you laugh, I made fun of myself from the time
Yes,
I
yes. So you
first
don't have to
interacted with
cry.
children.
Mhm,
Right.
mhm. Right. What was the writing process for you, considering all of the different things that you have been through and the different themes that you grew up with in your life? What was your writing process? And
Mm.
were these essays written over time, or did they pour out as you lived through these different experiences?
It's interesting because no, I did not write them as I lived through them. In fact,
Mm,
there were, and that's part of the thread of the book. There was a very large swath of my existence in which I wrote nothing. There were times when I couldn't even journal. I have tons of journals, but there were times when I wasn't even able to do that. Um,
mhm,
Expectations. I mean, my mother used to get angry at me when I would be in my room writing. She'd say, "Stop scribbling and come do some real work." Not
mhm.
because she was cruel, but she had 7 children and she needed help.
Yeah.
Um, the you know, I was not married to somebody who was sensitive to that world, and I did not I did not have help bringing up 3 children who were all born within 4 years. So there were periods of time when I just simply did not have it in me to write. But then there were periods where I would pull it back, like
Mhm.
when my kids were small and they swam competitively. I started writing for U.S. Swimming Magazine, and I started writing letters to the editor about things that had to do with my kids. When we moved from Arizona to Connecticut, there was a big brouhaha going on about arts education, and I wrote a very long letter to the editor that got published in the New Haven Register, and then kind of blew up, and I became sort of known as for writing little editorials here and there. And then I wrote because of my I was then by then directing the theater program at the high school, that I was doing summer theater programs. I was very heavily involved in educational theater. Um, and I started writing theater reviews, and I wrote them for the Hartford Courant and the New Haven Advocate and the New Haven Register. And so I would grease the wheel a little bit that way. I took courses at Wesleyan that required that I write essays. I had wonderful teachers there who encouraged me to write, um, and in fact wrote my recommendations for the program, for the MFA program. Um, so there was stop, start, stop, start, stop, start,
Yeah.
and all the time I sort of um, forced myself to remain creative by um, interacting and participating in the educational theater programs. Where
Have you?
and then of
Uh-huh.
course I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no, no. Go ahead.
Then I got involved with making movies. We made movies for a while, so I was screenwriting for a time. After I left high school, I wrote a few screenplays. Um, One of our short films was something I was very proud of, that was on a reel of a show reel for um, a, a company that's no longer in business, but they used it as a show to get people to do their to use their services. So and it was the first narrative film made on high definition video. So we were very proud of that. We shot that over 2 weeks in the winter in Connecticut. So anyway, the point is that there were stops and starts, and there were digressions. I went here, I went there, and
Mhm.
then when I came back to school, I kind of focused forward on the nonfiction writing.
Mm. I hear you've written lots of op-eds. You've been a screenwriter. Have you written any op-eds lately, and what was the title?
My blog is full of op-eds. Um,
Uh-huh. How can
the
we
last
find your blog?
It's carlastockton.me.
Okay. Your book is a meditation on survival, family, freedom, and lessons that you have learned. How can or what lesson do you expect or hope the readers take from your final page?
Two
Or
things.
long after they've read the final page, not from the final. Yes.
Although it's on the final page, because the final page is just a an optimistic, here we go kind of thing.
Yes.
There are two things that seem terribly important to me. One of them, and I never say it outright in the book, but it really shows in the journey, is that I never felt comfortable saying, please help me, to anybody.
Wow.
And I think people need to know there's always somebody there who can help you. I like to, my students will tell you that's my big selling point, is I always have a handout and say, I'm here. You know, that's what I'm here for, is to be your guide, whatever you need. And we all have the right to ask for that. I never felt like I had the right, or I thought I was, I had to be strong and I had to do it myself. So I didn't ask for help, and I never really got any. The other thing that I think is important to get out of this is things will often seem bleak. And there's no guarantee that everything's going to work out all right forever after. You know, there's not necessarily ever going to be a happily ever after. But if you appreciate the moments as they happen, if you appreciate the little victories that you have as you have them, your life will feel meaningful, and it'll make you happy. There's no such thing, from my perspective, there's no such thing as happiness, right? I'm never going to always be happy. I'm not going to be that person that walks through life joyfully, but I'm well adjusted. I am satisfied with who I am. For the most part, I'm happy. In that I'm content, right? That doesn't mean I'm going to stand for what I don't like. And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to keep trying to do more. Just I'm looking for contentment. And I think that comes out in the book, is that there is a way you can have contentment without finding without getting to Oz, right? You don't necessarily have to get to Oz to find happiness.
But you can have a freedom from your voice, or freedom of your voice.
That's right.
You write about leaving a stifling marriage, and I just wanted to touch on that based on what you just said. What advice would you give to a woman who feels like trapped or stuck in a traditional, or trapped in a traditional relationship, or a relationship that is no longer serving her?
It's a hard one, because every woman is individually programmed to know what she can or cannot tolerate anymore. From my perspective, if what you love is not respected, if what you love is not supported, if who you are is not important to the person you're with, who you are deeply, not simply what you are in the marriage, but who you are, what you want in life, what your goals are, what the promises were that you made each other at the beginning of your relationship. If those are no longer important to the person you're with, then that's when I stopped and said, I don't know if I can do this anymore. But at the same time, walking away from stability, walking away from the comfort of home, I will never have the comfort of home again that I had in those days. It's just, I'm not financially stable enough to ever expect that I'm ever going to be in that place again, right? Which is okay, but I have to be okay with that. And I am, and not everybody is, because what's important to me may not be important to somebody else. But I will say that the minute there's any kind of physical or verbal abuse, it's too much. Wow. It's too much. But again, that's an assessment that every woman has to make for herself.
Yes. because, you know, it is for us to use our experience to help the other woman, to help her get through these times. But it's also an individual thing because women on a whole, we have legacy, partnership, family, and the weight of being counted on. You know, people are
Yes,
looking to us. And
absolutely.
so, you know, how can you help a woman to think of herself and think of all these other things, you know? Is this something that we can even help a woman with?
Yeah, and then if you have children, there's I don't operate on my own for myself anymore. I operate if I have children, I have to think, well, what's the best for them? Is it better for me to ride this out because
Mm,
they like their dad or whatever the reason is, or we need him financially, or is it better for me to say to them, we're going to work together and we're going to make a life apart from him? That's something that every woman has to decide for herself. In my case, I was terrified. I figured with
mm,
3 kids, I didn't have any kind of um, wherewithal to financially support myself and 3 children, and
yeah.
my it was not within my ken to do that. Um,
So how old were your children when you finally said, you know what, I've had enough. This is not good for my soul. I'm fearful. I don't want to do this anymore.
my youngest was 23.
Ah, not bad, not bad, not bad. So you stayed for a long time.
33 years.
You endured for a
Yeah,
long time.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. Was there a moment when you realized if I don't leave, I will lose myself?
Many moments. And
Hmm.
then I would say, well, but that's okay. I'll find myself eventually. I've always been that person who says, well, if I can't figure it out today, I'll figure it out sometime. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm that's always been my sort of um the sort of crutch that I get myself through life with is, okay, well, if
Yeah.
I'm going to put it away. I'm not going to think about it right now. I'll figure it out when I have to, or I'll figure it out tomorrow, or I know I can figure it out eventually. But for now, I'll just stick with it the way it is. And so there were many moments when I thought that would happen, but not now. I'll deal with it when it comes. And when it finally happened, as it says in the book, I reached a point where I was broken. There was no
Mm.
way that I was going to march on without breaking it all apart and then putting the pieces back together on my own.
And boy,
And
you did.
I guess I did. I'm still
Mm,
doing it, and
yes.
I'm still struggling, and I suspect I'm 78 years old. I'm going to be
Yeah.
struggling the rest of my life, and there is
Maybe
not
not.
one.
Maybe not struggle the
Maybe
rest of your life. Maybe not.
I like to think that. But here's the
Yes.
thing, there's not 1 minute of one day that I regret that I did what I did.
What
And
helped you
that says,
prepare emotionally and spiritually and logistically for that transition that you don't regret?
at the time that I did it, I was deeply involved in an artistic endeavor with a couple of partners who were very supportive of my art. And
Mm,
the first time my filmmaking partner referred to me as an artist, I remember just bursting into tears because nobody had ever said that about me before.
you
And I
felt
thought,
seen.
I was finally seen.
Mm,
And having been seen at that moment, I couldn't go back to being unseen. And so knowing that was where it started. Um, yeah, and basically just honestly, my self-reliance, knowing that whatever it was, I deal with it, and believing deeply that whatever came, I would deal with it as best I could.
yes.
Sometimes better than other times, but just deal.
Yeah, you had more to honor. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I have a very deep belief that I don't believe that things work out the way they're supposed to necessarily, but I believe that things work out the way they do, and that
Oh,
there's
okay.
an inevitability to where we to to it all. And people ask me, well, you're old. What do you think of death? And I say, well, I think it's just another step that I'm going to face when I get there. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
It's that's who I am. I face what I face when I get there.
Wow. Whew. How can we get your book and join your world?
I would love to have people contact me. Um,
Hmm.
I have my blog, carlastockton.me.
Uh-huh.
Um, I have an email address, carlastocktonwrites@gmail.com. I love to hear from people.
Hmm.
Um, my book is available wherever books are sold. I highly encourage you to go to private sellers, but Amazon, if you go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble and you get it there, please write a review, because the review pushes the algorithm to sell the book, and that's part of the struggle, isn't it?
That's
Um,
right. Yeah, we have to do the work of writing and selling and promoting.
selling.
Yeah.
If I had known when I wrote this, I might have left it for my kids to publish. But anyway, because I'm not a good business person, but I'm working on it. I'm working on it because I need to. Um, yeah, so that's how you get. I'm on Facebook.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a writing page on Facebook called Carla Stockton Writes.
Hmm.
But I'm also there as Carla Stockton, so I'm there. I'm just out there.
Carla, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today
you.
and for
This was
sharing
I
your
talked too much,
perspective.
but I loved it.
I love it. Before
Thank
you
you.
go, I like to ask my guests three questions, and I don't know if you received them before, but
I
I'm
did.
gonna shoot. Okay, what's one bold promise that you can share with the audience?
Um, one bold promise is that, um, wow, I was looking for my answers, but I'm not going to find them. Um, one bold promise is that no matter how good things are right now, they're going to change. And
Mm.
you have to be ready for whatever change is coming.
Ooh, girl, that one is tough because no matter how good things are, that things are going to change, and it could be for the better, and it could be for the worse.
That's exactly right. And you just have to know that that's out there.
Mm. You just got to be prepared.
Yep. Just got to trust yourself that you're going to
Hmm.
deal with what you need to deal with when you need to deal with it.
I like that one. What's a bold statement that you can share with the audience that will cause a paradigm shift?
It's what I said to you about we can change the way we interact, men and women, without the vitriol. We don't, there are things about the Me Too movement that have been very positive, but
Mm-hmm.
they're, as the mother of a son and the grandmother of a grandson, and as an advocate of people, I find that the divisiveness
Mm-hmm.
of the Me Too movement has like so many of the movements that are afoot these days has pushed us apart, and we need to cleave to we need to come back together. We need
We
to
need that
find a way.
solidarity.
Yes,
Hmm. See
yes,
each other's pain and see how we can be a refuge to both parties.
exactly. You know what I
Hmm.
tell my acting students? Acting, the key to good acting is one word: listening. And I think that the key to good living is listening, being able to hear not the idea of what somebody is saying, but the essence of what somebody is saying to you,
Yeah.
and to be able to really respond to it with empathy and compassion.
Yes. Thank you. I like that. What is a bold move that you'd like to make in the future?
Mm. I want to finish my next book.
Hmm.
Um, I want to find a way to love America again.
Ooh, you just touched on something very deep.
In all of
Because
this.
we're all feeling so hurt right now. A lot of us, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us are feeling hurt. And even people that thought things were going to go their way are now looking at their decision like, wow, I can't
Exactly.
believe, I made this decision and this person is turning on what I stood for. And
Exactly.
so I get that. But what we have to understand is that America is not about the government. It's about us,
It
humans,
is.
the diversity, and how we come together and how we are different, and how political people in government, they have a different idea than who we truly are. So we can love each other. And that's how we
That's
love
right.
America again.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. I like that a lot.
You're so welcome because I'm there, girl. I'm with you. Okay.
So many of us are.
Thank you so much. If this conversation touched something in you, share it. Please send it to the woman you know is struggling in silence, the woman you know is speaking out because she has to in this time, and because the stories like this don't just shift mindsets, they saves lives. So thank you so much for listening, and if you are interested in sharing your own story, please send me an email to author Denise Nicholson at gmail.com or go to boldpublishings.com. Thank you so much for listening, and please share.
Thank you for joining us for the Bold Book of the Day with Dr. Denise Nicholson, a central hub and a safe space for authors to share their stories. Follow Dr. Denise on Facebook and Instagram at Denise Nicholson, or go to denisenicholson.com. Remember, no one can share your story better than you.